Hello, love. You made it through today. Now you don't have to do anything else. If you want to stay with me, a quiet like or subscribe helps. Now sit back or lay down, relax, and rest your mind. I'll stay right here while you drift. There's something about a lighthouse that feels like a promise, isn't there? Not the loud kind, not the kind written down or announced, just the quiet kind, the kind that says, I'll be here, even when it's dark, even when no one's watching, even when you're not sure you'll make it back. I've always loved that idea, the steadiness of it. The way a lighthouse doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't ask you to be ready or worthy or sure of yourself. It just keeps the light on. And if you need it, it's there. And if you don't, it's still there. Waiting, patient, constant. Tonight's story is about that kind of presence. It's about someone who stayed awake so others could rest. Someone who learned that devotion doesn't always look like grand gestures or declarations. Sometimes it looks like showing up, night after night, keeping the light burning. Not because anyone asked, but because it mattered. And it's about someone else, someone who didn't realize they were lost until they found a place that felt like coming home. Someone who learned that being seen doesn't always mean being understood right away. Sometimes it just means someone notices when you arrive, and when you leave, and when you come back. This isn't a story about danger or rescue or dramatic confessions in the rain. It's quieter than that. It's about the small moments that add up to something you can't name but can't live without. It's about the comfort of knowing someone will be there, the relief of not having to explain yourself, the intimacy of silence that doesn't need to be filled. It's about two people who found each other without looking, who built something tender and unshakable without ever talking about what they were building, who realized slowly, carefully, that some promises don't need words. I want you to imagine a coastline, rocky and wild but not harsh, the kind of place where the ocean sounds like breathing, where the wind isn't cruel, just persistent, where the salt air makes everything feel a little softer, a little older, a little more permanent. And at the edge of that coastline, there's a lighthouse. It's not grand, not famous. No one writes postcards about it. But it's beautiful in the way old things are beautiful when they've been loved. White stone, weathered but strong. A red roof that's faded to rust in some places. Windows that catch the afternoon light and turn gold. And at the top, a lantern room, glass panels all the way around, and inside a light that never goes out. Not because it has to stay on, not because of regulations or duty or fear, but because someone decided a long time ago that it should. And that someone is still there, still keeping watch, still tending the light, still waiting for the people who need to know that something, somewhere, is constant. Our story begins on a night like any other, quiet, cool. the kind of night where the world feels like it's holding its breath. And in that stillness, someone arrives at the lighthouse for the first time. They don't know yet what they're looking for, but the light is on, and that's enough. The lighthouse keeper's name was Elliot. He was 34, though he often forgot that. Time moved differently when you lived by the rhythms of the sea and the sky instead of clocks and calendars. He knew the tides better than he knew the date. He could tell you when the sun would set within 2 minutes, but he couldn't tell you what day of the week it was without checking. He'd been keeping the lighthouse for 6 years. Before that, he'd been other things: a teacher for a while, a carpenter's apprentice, a son who disappointed his parents by choosing a life they didn't understand. But those versions of himself felt distant now, like stories he'd heard about someone else. The lighthouse had become his entire world, and he'd become its. He didn't mind the solitude. In fact, he preferred it. People exhausted him in ways he'd never been able to explain, not because he disliked them, but because being around them required a kind of performance he'd never been good at: smiling at the right times, knowing what to say, pretending that small talk mattered. Here, he didn't have to pretend. The ocean didn't need him to be charming. The light didn't care if he was eloquent. The wind didn't judge him for spending an entire day in silence. His routines were simple and satisfying. He woke before dawn most mornings, not because he had to, but because he liked the quiet of that hour. He'd make coffee in the small kitchen at the base of the lighthouse, nothing fancy, just strong and hot, and carry it up the spiral staircase to the lantern room. From there, he could see everything: the ocean stretching out in all directions, endless and shifting, the sky turning from black to gray to soft pink, the rocky shoreline below where the waves broke and retreated in a rhythm that never changed. He'd stand there with his coffee and watch the world wake up, and he'd feel something he didn't have a word for. Not happiness, exactly. Not peace. Something quieter. Something like, this is enough. After the sunrise, he'd tend to the lighthouse itself, cleaning the glass panels in the lantern room so the light could shine without obstruction, checking the mechanisms, even though they rarely needed checking, sweeping the stairs, organizing the small storage room where he kept tools and supplies and books he'd read a dozen times. In the afternoons, he'd walk the shoreline, collecting driftwood sometimes, watching the birds, letting his mind wander in the way it only could when there was no one around to interrupt. And in the evenings, he'd return to the lantern room. He'd light the lamp, an old Fresnel lens that had been electrified decades ago, but still required his attention, his care, and he'd settle into the chair by the window with a book or a notebook or nothing at all. And he'd stay there all night, keeping watch. The lighthouse was automated, technically. It didn't need him to stay awake. The light would turn on and off on its own, guided by timers and sensors. But Elliot had never trusted that. Or maybe he just didn't want to. He liked being there when the light turned on. He liked knowing that if something went wrong, if a ship passed closer than usual, if the weather turned, he'd be awake to see it. But more than that, he liked the idea of it. Someone keeping watch, someone staying awake so others could rest. It felt like the only kind of purpose that made sense to him. So every night he climbed the stairs to the lantern room, and every night he stayed. And on this particular night, cool and clear, with a sky so full of stars it almost hurt to look at, he didn't know that his solitude was about to shift. He didn't know that someone was walking toward the lighthouse at that very moment. Someone who'd been driving for hours. Someone who'd pulled off the highway on impulse, following a road they didn't recognize toward a coastline they'd never seen. Someone who was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Someone who saw the light from a distance and thought, "I wonder if I can get closer." Elliot was reading when he heard the footsteps on the gravel path below. He looked up, surprised. Visitors were rare, especially at this hour. The lighthouse wasn't officially open to the public, though it wasn't forbidden either. It was just forgotten, tucked away on a stretch of coast that didn't lead anywhere, didn't offer anything except rocks and waves and solitude. He set his book down and moved to the window. Below, in the glow of the exterior lamps he kept lit along the path, he saw a figure, small, hesitant. A woman, he thought, though he couldn't be sure from this distance. She stopped at the base of the lighthouse, looked up, her face tilted toward the light. Elliot watched her, curious but not alarmed. She didn't knock, didn't call out, just stood there looking up at the light like she was trying to decide something. And then, after a long moment, she sat down, right there on the stone bench near the entrance. The one Elliot had built himself a few years ago, thinking that maybe someday someone would want to sit and look at the ocean. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, and she stayed. Elliot didn't go down to greet her. He thought about it, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she'd sat down, like she didn't want to be bothered, like she just needed a place to exist for a while. He understood that. So he let her be. He went back to his chair, picked up his book, and tried to read. But his attention kept drifting to the window, to the woman sitting below in the quiet. She stayed for an hour, maybe more. And then, without a sound, she stood up, looked at the lighthouse one more time, and walked back down the gravel path toward wherever she'd come from. Elliot watched her go. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she'd come or where she was going, but he found himself hoping she'd come back. She did come back. 3 nights later. Elliot was in the lantern room again, as he always was when he heard the footsteps, the same slow, hesitant rhythm, the same pause at the base of the lighthouse. He looked out the window and saw her. Same person, same posture. She sat on the bench again, pulled her knees up again, and stayed. This time, Elliot didn't even consider going down. It felt like an unspoken agreement now. She could sit. He could keep the light on. Neither of them had to explain. She stayed for 2 hours that night. When she left, Elliot felt the absence more than he expected to. The third time she came, it was raining. Not a storm, just a steady, soft rain that made everything sound muffled and distant. Elliot almost didn't hear her footsteps, but when he looked out, there she was, sitting on the bench, in the rain. She wasn't dressed for it. No umbrella, no raincoat, just a sweater that was probably soaked through by now. Elliot frowned. He waited a few minutes, thinking she'd realize and leave. But she didn't move. He sighed, set his book down, and for the first time he descended the spiral staircase. The rain was cold when he stepped outside. He'd grabbed an old jacket on his way down, and now he shrugged it off and walked over to the bench. She looked up at him, startled. "You'll catch a cold," Elliot said quietly. She blinked. Rain dripped from her hair, ran down her face. She looked exhausted. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was soft, a little hoarse. "You're soaked," Elliot said. He held out the jacket. She stared at it, then at him, like she wasn't sure if this was allowed. "Please," he said. She took it, slowly, wrapped it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. Elliot nodded. He hesitated, then gestured toward the lighthouse. "There's a covered porch on the other side, if you want." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood. He led her around to the small porch that overlooked the ocean. It wasn't much, just a wooden overhang and a bench, but it was dry. She sat down, pulled the jacket tighter. Elliot stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure what to do now. "I'm Elliot," he said finally. "Anna," she said. "Nice to meet you, Anna." She nodded, looked out at the rain falling on the ocean. Elliot waited, but she didn't say anything else, and he didn't know what to say either. "I'll be upstairs," he said after a while, "if you need anything." She glanced at him. "You stay up all night?" "Every night." "Why?" He shrugged. "Someone should." She looked at him a little longer, something unreadable in her expression. Then she nodded. "Okay." Elliot went back inside, climbed the stairs, returned to his chair, but he couldn't focus on his book. He kept thinking about her sitting down there in the rain, kept wondering what had brought her here, what she was running from, or running toward. He didn't ask, but he made a decision. The next time she came, and he knew there would be a next time, he'd make sure there was coffee waiting. Anna came back 2 nights later. This time it wasn't raining. The sky was clear and cold, the kind of night where you could see your breath. Elliot heard her footsteps and looked out. She was standing at the base of the lighthouse, looking up like she had the first time. He didn't go down right away. He finished the paragraph he was reading, marked his place. Then he stood and descended the stairs. When he stepped outside, she turned toward him. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the silence stretching between them, but not uncomfortable. "I made coffee," Elliot said. "If you want some." Her face softened. "Really? It's not fancy." "I don't need fancy." He led her inside into the small kitchen at the base of the lighthouse. The space was warm and cluttered in a comfortable way. Mismatched mugs on a shelf, a kettle on the stove, a worn table with 2 chairs. He poured her a cup of coffee from the pot he'd made earlier. She wrapped both hands around it like it was something precious. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." They stood there in the kitchen, sipping coffee, not talking. After a few minutes, Anna said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do you stay awake all night?" Elliot considered the question. He'd answered it before. Someone should. But he knew that wasn't really an answer. "I like it," he said finally. "The quiet, the solitude, knowing that while everyone else is asleep, I'm here, keeping watch." "Over what?" "I don't know. The ocean, the light, myself, maybe." Anna nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "Does it?" "Yeah." She took another sip of coffee. "I think some people need to feel like they're holding something together, even if it's just a light in the dark." Elliot looked at her, surprised by how accurately she'd put it. "What about you?" he asked. "Why do you come here?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she said finally. "I just needed somewhere to be, somewhere that didn't ask anything of me. This place doesn't ask much." I noticed. They finished their coffee in silence. When Anna set her cup down, she looked at him. "Can I come back?" "Any time." "I won't bother you." "You're not bothering me." She smiled, just a small one, but it was the first time Elliot had seen her smile, and it changed her whole face. "Good night, Elliot." "Good night, Anna." She left, and Elliot climbed back to the lantern room. But the silence felt different now, less lonely, more like it was waiting for something. Anna came back the next night, and the night after that. A pattern formed without either of them naming it. She'd arrive sometime after dark. Elliot would hear her footsteps and make his way downstairs. They'd have coffee in the small kitchen. Sometimes they'd talk, sometimes they wouldn't. And then Anna would go sit on the covered porch, and Elliot would return to the lantern room. But he'd leave the door to the porch unlocked, and sometimes, when the wind picked up or the temperature dropped, Anna would come inside. She'd climb the spiral staircase slowly, carefully, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. And Elliot would look up from his book and nod toward the second chair. She'd sit, and they'd exist together in the quiet. Elliot learned things about Anna slowly, in fragments. She lived a few towns over. She worked at a bookstore, which explained why her hands always smelled faintly of paper and ink. She'd moved to the coast a year ago, though she didn't say from where or why. She had trouble sleeping. That much was obvious. She never said it outright, but Elliot recognized the signs, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself, like she was always tired but couldn't rest. He didn't pry, but he started noticing small things. The way she'd relax when she sat in the lantern room, the way her shoulders would drop, her breathing would slow. Like the light, the constancy of it soothed something in her. One night, about 2 weeks after they'd first spoken, Anna fell asleep in the chair across from him. Elliot noticed when her breathing changed, when the book in her lap slipped slightly and she didn't catch it. He looked over and saw her head tilted back, her eyes closed, her face peaceful in a way he'd never seen before. He didn't wake her. He just sat there, reading quietly, keeping watch, letting her rest. She slept for 3 hours. When she woke, she looked disoriented at first. Then she saw Elliot, saw where she was, and her face flushed. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine. I should go." "You don't have to." She looked at him, uncertain. "Stay as long as you want," Elliot said. "Sleep if you need to. I'll be here." Her eyes glistened slightly. She nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, and she stayed. The weeks passed, and Anna's visits became as regular as the tides. She came every night now, sometimes early, sometimes late, but always Elliot would hear her footsteps, and something in him would settle. They developed routines within their routine. Coffee first, always. Elliot had started buying better beans, though he'd never admit that's why. Anna noticed but didn't comment. She'd just smile into her cup and say, "This is good." After coffee, they'd talk for a while. Small things, mostly. Books they were reading, weather patterns, the way the ocean looked different depending on the time of year. Anna told him about the bookstore where she worked. It was an old place, she said, with creaky floors and a cat named Tolstoy who judged customers from his perch on the classics shelf. She loved it there, loved the smell of paper, the quiet concentration of people browsing, the way a good recommendation could change someone's day. Elliot told her about the Lighthouse, its history, which he'd researched obsessively when he first took the position. It had been built in 1887, had survived 3 hurricanes, and had once been the only thing standing after a storm leveled the nearby fishing village. There was something about that resilience that Elliot found comforting. But they didn't always talk. Some nights, Anna would just sit with him in the lantern room, looking out at the dark ocean while Elliot read. Some nights, she'd bring her own book and they'd read together in companionable silence. And some nights, she'd fall asleep. Elliot never minded. He'd dim the small lamp on his side of the room, keep his movements quiet, and let her rest. He found himself looking forward to those nights, to the sound of her breathing, soft and even, to the knowledge that she felt safe enough here to let go. One night, about a month into their unspoken arrangement, Anna asked him something that surprised him. "Do you ever get lonely?" They were in the lantern room. She was curled up in her usual chair, a blanket Elliot had brought up wrapped around her shoulders. He was at the window, watching a ship's lights move slowly across the horizon. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "But you chose this," Anna said. "The solitude." "I did." "Why?" Elliot thought about how to answer. "I think I was lonelier around people than I am here." Anna was quiet for a moment. "I understand that." "Do you?" "Yeah." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I used to think something was wrong with me because I couldn't fit, couldn't make small talk feel natural or care about the things everyone else seemed to care about. I felt like I was always performing, always exhausting myself, trying to be the version of me that other people wanted." Elliot turned to look at her. "And now I work in a bookstore where being quiet is an asset. I live alone. I don't have to explain myself to anyone." She paused. "Except I still feel like something's missing, like I'm waiting for something I can't name." "Maybe you're not missing anything," Elliot said quietly. "Maybe you're just different. And different is harder, but it's not wrong." Anna looked at him, and in her eyes he saw recognition, understanding, the relief of being seen. "Is that why you're here?" Elliot asked. "At the lighthouse?" "I think so," Anna said. "I think I needed a place where I didn't have to be anything except present, where I could just exist. And when I saw the light that first night, I thought, there's someone awake, someone keeping watch. And that felt safe." "You are safe here." "I know," she smiled. "That's why I keep coming back." They started sharing meals. It happened gradually. One night, Elliot mentioned he was making soup, and Anna asked if she could help. He'd hesitated. His kitchen was small, his cooking basic. But he'd said yes. She'd chopped vegetables while he handled the broth. They'd moved around each other easily, like they'd done this 100 times before. And when the soup was ready, they'd sat at the small table and eaten together. It became a pattern. Anna started bringing things sometimes. Fresh bread from the bakery near her bookstore, cheese. Once a bottle of wine, though neither of them drank much. They'd cook together in the tiny kitchen, talking about nothing important. And then they'd eat and clean up and make their way to the lantern room. Elliot found himself looking forward to these evenings more than he'd looked forward to anything in years. There was something deeply intimate about sharing a meal with someone, about the quiet domesticity of cooking together, of sitting across from each other, of the small gestures, passing the salt, refilling a glass, that required no words. One evening, as they were washing dishes, Anna said, "I don't think I've thanked you." Elliot looked at her. For what? For this, for letting me be here, for not asking questions or making me explain. You don't have to thank me. I want to. She dried her hands on a towel. You've given me something I didn't know I needed, a place to rest, not just physically, emotionally. I didn't realize how tired I was until I had somewhere I could stop. Elliot's chest tightened. I'm glad you're here. Are you? Yes? She smiled, and there was something in that smile, something warm and tentative and hopeful that made Elliot's heart skip. It was around this time that Elliot started noticing things he hadn't let himself notice before. The way Anna's hair caught the light from the lantern. The way she tucked it behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she laughed, not often, but when she did, it was genuine and unguarded and beautiful. The way she looked at him sometimes, like he mattered, like his presence was something she needed. He didn't know what to do with these feelings. Romance had never been something Elliot understood. He'd had relationships before, years ago, but they'd always felt like obligations, like he was supposed to want certain things, companionship, intimacy, a future, but couldn't make himself care enough to fight for them. This felt different. This didn't feel like obligation. It felt like inevitability, like something that had been quietly building since the first night Anna sat outside his lighthouse and looked up at the light. But he didn't say anything. He was afraid of disrupting the balance they'd found, afraid that naming what he felt would change things, make them complicated. So he kept it to himself. And he kept the light on. One night, the power went out. It was a rare occurrence. The lighthouse had backup generators, redundant systems. But something had failed. The light went dark. The electric hum that usually filled the lantern room went silent, and Elliot and Anna were plunged into darkness. Elliot? Anna's voice was uncertain. I'm here, he said quickly. Don't move. I'll get a flashlight. He found one in the storage cabinet, clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, found Anna's face. She looked worried. Is everything okay? She asked. Yeah, just a power issue. I'll fix it. He went down to the generator room, Anna following behind him with a second flashlight. It took him 20 minutes to figure out the problem, a tripped breaker, something simple, and reset the system. The lights flickered back on. the lantern above them resumed its slow rotation. Elliot sighed with relief. When he turned around, Anna was watching him. "You really care about this," she said softly. "About the lighthouse. About making sure the light stays on." Elliot nodded. "It's important." "Why?" "Because," he struggled to put it into words, "because someone might need it. Someone out there in the dark might be looking for a sign that they're not alone. And I want to make sure it's there." Anna's eyes were bright. "You're a good person, Elliot." "I don't know about that." "I do." She stepped closer, and for a moment, Elliot thought she might kiss him. But she didn't. She just reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." And then she let go and walked back upstairs. Elliot stood there in the generator room, his heart pounding, his hands still warm from her touch. He didn't know what was happening between them, but he knew he didn't want it to stop. Winter came, and with it, longer nights. The darkness stretched earlier into the evening and lingered later into the morning. The ocean turned gray and restless. The wind grew sharp and unforgiving. But inside the lighthouse, everything felt warmer. Anna started arriving earlier now, sometimes before the sun had fully set. She'd help Elliot with his evening tasks, cleaning the glass panels, checking the mechanisms, preparing the light. She was good at it, careful and methodical. She seemed to understand, without him having to explain, why these small rituals mattered. One evening, as they worked together in the lantern room, she said, "I told my coworker about you." Elliot paused. "You did?" "Sort of. She asked why I've been happier lately. I said I'd been spending time with a friend." "What did she say?" Anna smiled. "She said I should invite you to the bookstore sometime. Said anyone who makes me smile like that is worth meeting." Elliot felt something flutter in his chest. "Do I make you smile?" "You do." They worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Elliot asked, "Would you want that, for me to visit the bookstore?" "Would you want to?" He thought about it. The idea of leaving the lighthouse, going into town, meeting Anna's coworker. It all sounded overwhelming. But then he thought about Anna, about seeing the place she loved, about being part of her world the way she'd become part of his. "Yeah," he said, "I would." Anna's face lit up. "Really? Really? Okay." She was grinning now. "Okay, maybe next week?" Next week. Elliot visited the bookstore on a Thursday afternoon. He'd timed it carefully, after the morning rush, before the evening crowd. Anna had told him Thursdays were usually quiet. The shop was exactly how she'd described it. Old, cozy, Shelves packed tight with books, wooden floors that creaked, the smell of paper and dust and possibility. Anna was behind the counter when he walked in. She looked up and her whole face changed. "You came," she said. "I came." She came around the counter and hugged him. It was brief, almost tentative, but it was the first time they'd embraced, and Elliot felt like he'd been waiting for it without knowing. "Let me show you around," Anna said. She led him through the stacks, pointing out her favorite sections, telling him stories about regular customers and rare finds. She introduced him to Tolstoy, the bookstore cat, who regarded Elliot with regal indifference before deciding he was acceptable and headbutting his hand. "He likes you," Anna said. "That's rare." They spent an hour wandering the store. Anna pulled books off shelves and handed them to him. "You'd like this one." And Elliot found himself believing her, trusting her taste, loving the way she talked about stories, the way her eyes lit up when she described a particularly good ending. Her co-worker, a woman named Rita with silver hair and sharp eyes, appeared from the back room at some point. "So you're Elliot," she said. "I am." She looked him up and down. "Anna talks about you." "Does she?" "All the time." Rita smiled. "She's different since she met you. Lighter. I like it." Elliot didn't know what to say to that. "I like her," he said finally. "Good. She deserves someone who likes her." Rita turned to Anna. "I'm taking my break. Don't burn the place down." She left, and Anna laughed. "Sorry," she said. "Rita's protective." "I don't mind." They stood there in the quiet bookstore, surrounded by stories, and Elliot thought, this is what happiness feels like. That night, back at the lighthouse, something shifted. Anna arrived after closing the bookstore, carrying a bag of takeout. "I thought we could have dinner," she said. They ate at the small kitchen table, Thai food, fragrant and warm. They talked about the bookstore, about Elliot's visit, about Tolstoy's approval. And then Anna said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Elliot's pulse quickened. "Okay." "Why don't you ever leave the lighthouse? I mean, I know you left today, but before that, how long has it been?" Elliot thought about it. 6 months, maybe. I go into town for supplies sometimes, but not often." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because it's easier, being here, not having to navigate the world out there, the expectations, the noise." "You're hiding," Anna said gently. "Maybe." "From what?" "From feeling like I don't belong anywhere." Anna reached across the table and took his hand. "You belong here." "Do I?" "Yes." Her voice was firm. "And you belong with me, if you want to." Elliot's breath caught. "Anna." "I know we haven't talked about this," she said quickly, "about what this is, but I need you to know I don't come here just because the lighthouse is peaceful. I come here because you're here, because being with you feels like the first time I've ever felt at home with another person. Elliot's eyes burned. I feel that too. You do? Every time you walk through that door, every time you sit across from me, every time you fall asleep in that chair, and I get to watch over you, I feel like this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Elliot, I love you, he said. The words came out before he could stop them, before he could second guess or overthink. I don't know when it happened, but I do. I love you. Anna stood up, came around the table, and she kissed him. It was soft and tentative and perfect. It was everything Elliot had imagined and nothing he'd expected. When they pulled apart, Anna was crying. I love you too, she whispered. I love you so much. They didn't rush anything. There was no urgency, no need to define what they were or where this was going. They just continued. Anna kept coming to the lighthouse every night, but now, when she arrived, Elliot would kiss her. When they sat in the lantern room, she'd curl up against him instead of in a separate chair. When she fell asleep, he'd hold her hand and feel his heart swell with gratitude. They talked more now about their pasts, their fears, their dreams. Anna told him about the years before she moved to the coast, about the depression that had nearly swallowed her, about the day she'd driven away from her old life with no plan except to find somewhere she could breathe. Elliot told her about his family, about feeling like a disappointment, about the relief he'd felt when he found the lighthouse job posting, like the universe was giving him permission to disappear. They held each other's pain gently. They didn't try to fix anything. They just listened, understood, stayed. One night, as they sat together watching the lights sweep across the dark ocean, Anna said, I used to think I'd always be alone. And now I know I won't be, because you're here, and you're not going anywhere. Elliot kissed her temple. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. Spring arrived slowly, tentatively, like it wasn't sure it was welcome yet. The days grew longer, the wind softened, the ocean turned from gray to blue, and the wildflowers that grew in the rocky soil around the lighthouse began to bloom. Anna started spending entire nights at the lighthouse. Not every night. She still had her own apartment, her own life. But more and more often, she'd arrive in the evening and stay until morning. She'd sleep in Elliot's bed, a narrow thing, barely big enough for two, but they made it work, while he kept watch in the lantern room. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night and come find him. She'd climb the spiral stairs in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and he'd pull her into his lap and hold her while they watched the light together. You don't have to stay awake every night, she told him once. I know. You could rest. I'll be here. Elliot considered it. The idea of sleeping through the night, of trusting someone else to keep watch. It felt impossible, but also, for the first time, appealing. Maybe, he said, someday. Anna kissed his cheek. No pressure. I just want you to know you don't have to carry this alone anymore. They started making plans, small ones at first, day trips when the bookstore was closed, visits to nearby towns, a picnic on the beach, then bigger ones. Anna mentioned casually that her lease was up in a few months. Where will you go? Elliot asked. She looked at him. I don't know. I've been thinking about that. You could stay here. The words hung in the air between them. At the lighthouse, Anna said carefully. With me. Are you asking me to move in with you? Elliot's heart pounded. Yes. Anna smiled. Okay. Okay? Yes, I want to. She laughed, a little breathless. God, I want to. I've been hoping you'd ask. Really? Elliot, I spend every night here anyway. I love this place. I love you. Of course I want to stay. He kissed her then, long and deep and full of relief. We'll make it work, he said. We'll figure it out together. Together, Anna echoed. I like the sound of that. Anna moved in on a Saturday in late April. She didn't have much. A few boxes of books, some clothes, a small collection of plants she insisted would thrive with the ocean air. Elliot helped her carry everything up the spiral stairs. They rearranged the small living space at the base of the lighthouse to make room for her things. She set up her books on a shelf next to his, and seeing them side by side made something in Elliot's chest tighten with happiness. This feels right, Anna said, looking around. It does. That night, they cooked dinner together in the kitchen that was now officially theirs. They ate on the porch, watching the sun set over the ocean. And when darkness fell, they climbed to the lantern room together. Anna had brought her laptop. I thought I could do some work up here sometimes, she said. If that's okay. The bookstore's been asking me to help with their online catalog. Of course it's okay. She settled into her chair, which Elliot had started thinking of as hers months ago, and opened her laptop. Elliot returned to his book. They worked in comfortable silence. The light rotated above them. The ocean breathed beyond the windows, and Elliot thought, this is it. This is the life I want. Living together was easier than Elliot had expected. They fell into rhythms naturally. Anna would work at the bookstore during the day while Elliot tended to the lighthouse. She'd come home in the late afternoon, and they'd have dinner together. Then she'd work on her laptop or read while Elliot kept watch. Some nights she'd fall asleep in the lantern room, and Elliot would carry her down to bed. Other nights she'd stay awake with him until dawn, talking or just existing together. They learned each other's needs, When Anna needed quiet, Elliot gave her space. When Elliot felt overwhelmed by too much social interaction, a rare supply trip, an unexpected visitor, Anna would hold him and not ask questions. They weren't perfect. They had disagreements sometimes. Small things, mostly. How to organize the kitchen, whether to adopt a cat. Anna wanted to. Elliot was hesitant. When to replace the old generator. But they talked through everything. They compromised. They never went to bed angry. And every night, no matter what had happened during the day, Elliot kept the light on. It had become more than a duty now. It was a promise. To Anna, to himself, to whatever future they were building together. The light would always be on. One evening in late May, Anna asked him something that changed everything. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the stars emerge. "Elliot," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why do you really stay awake all night?" He'd answered this question before, but something in her tone made him pause, made him consider it more deeply. "I told you," he said, "someone should keep watch." "But why you?" Because I can, because I want to." "But what are you watching for?" Elliot was silent for a long time. "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm just afraid that if I stop, something will go wrong, that someone will need the light and it won't be there." "But the light is automated," Anna said gently. "It doesn't need you to stay awake." "I know." "So this isn't really about the lighthouse, is it?" Elliot felt something crack open in his chest. "No." "What is it about?" He took a shaky breath. "It's about control, about feeling like I have a purpose, about being afraid that if I stop being useful, I'll stop mattering." Anna took his hand. "Elliot, you matter to me, not because of what you do, just because of who you are." "I know that intellectually." But it's hard to believe." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What if we kept watch together?" "What do you mean?" "What if some nights I stayed awake and you slept, and other nights you stayed awake and I slept? We could take turns, share the responsibility." Elliot's first instinct was to refuse, but then he looked at Anna, at the love and understanding in her eyes, and he thought, maybe she's right. "You'd do that?" he asked. "Of course." "Why?" "Because I love you, and because you've been keeping watch alone for so long, you deserve to rest." Elliot felt tears prick his eyes. "I don't know if I can." "We'll try together. No pressure." "But maybe it's time to trust that the light will stay on, even if you're not the one watching it." They started small. The first night, Elliot stayed awake in the lantern room as usual, but Anna stayed with him instead of going to bed. I'm keeping watch with you, she said. You don't have to. I want to. They sat together through the night. Elliot read. Anna worked on her laptop. When dawn came, they watched the sunrise together. See, Anna said, we did it. You didn't sleep. Neither did you, but we were together. That's the point. The next night, Anna insisted that Elliot try to sleep for a few hours while she kept watch. I'll wake you if anything happens, she promised. Elliot was skeptical, but he was also exhausted in a way he hadn't admitted to himself in years. So he went to bed. He didn't think he'd be able to sleep. His mind kept circling back to the lantern room, to the light, to the ocean beyond. But Anna had kissed him goodnight and said, I've got this. Rest. And somehow, impossibly, he did. When he woke 3 hours later, disoriented and guilty, he rushed up to the lantern room expecting, he didn't know what, disaster, darkness. But Anna was there. The light was on. Everything was fine. She looked up from her book and smiled. Good morning. I slept, Elliot said, shocked. You did. And everything's okay. Everything's perfect. He sat down next to her, his heart still racing. I can't believe I did that. You were tired, Elliot. You've been tired for 6 years. It's okay to rest. He pulled her close. Thank you. For what? For this. For caring. For being here. Always. Over the next few weeks, they established a new rhythm. Some nights, Elliot would sleep for a few hours while Anna kept watch. Other nights, Anna would sleep and Elliot would stay awake. And sometimes they'd both stay awake together, talking through the small hours or simply existing side by side. Elliot was amazed by how much lighter he felt, how the burden he'd been carrying alone for so long became bearable when shared. He slept better, felt more rested, smiled more easily. You're different, Anna said one morning over coffee. How? Softer, less weighted down. Is that good? It's very good. She kissed him. I like seeing you like this. In June, Anna suggested something new. What if we took a trip? She said. Elliot looked up from the book he was reading. A trip? Yeah, just for a few days. We could drive up the coast, stay in a bed and breakfast, see some new places. But the lighthouse can function on its own, Anna finished gently. For a few days. It's automated, remember? Elliot felt panic rise in his chest. I don't know. I'm not trying to pressure you. I think it might be good for us to have an adventure together, to see that the world beyond this place isn't as scary as it feels. Elliot wanted to refuse, but he also remembered what Anna had said months ago. "You're hiding." And she was right. He was. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay? Let's do it. Let's take a trip." Anna's face lit up. "Really? Really, I'm terrified, but I want to try." She kissed him. "We'll go slow, and if you hate it, we'll come home. I promise." They left on a Thursday morning in late June. Elliot had spent the previous night double-checking every system in the lighthouse, adjusting the timers, verifying the backup generators, making sure everything would run smoothly in his absence. Anna had watched him with patient understanding, not commenting on his anxiety. When they finally got in the car, Elliot looked back at the lighthouse, at the light that would keep turning even without him. "It'll be here when we get back," Anna said softly. "I know. And so will we, together." They drove north along the coast. The ocean stayed with them, a constant presence on their left. They stopped at small towns, had lunch at a cafe with outdoor seating, browsed a used bookstore where Anna found 3 novels she'd been searching for, and Elliot found a field guide to coastal birds. They checked into a bed and breakfast in a town neither of them had visited before. The room was small and cozy, with a view of the harbor. That night, as they lay in the unfamiliar bed, Elliot said, "I thought I'd hate this." And I don't. It's nice. It is. I think I forgot that the world could be nice, that leaving didn't mean losing something. Anna propped herself up on one elbow. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you've spent so long being the lighthouse, being the steady thing that other people could rely on, that you forgot you could rely on something too." Elliot's throat tightened. "Maybe. You don't have to hold everything together alone. You can let go sometimes. The world won't fall apart." "How do you know?" "Because I'm here, and I'll catch you if you fall." They stayed away for 3 days. On the 3rd day, as they drove back toward the lighthouse, Elliot realized something had shifted in him. He was still anxious about the lighthouse, still worried about what they'd find when they got back. But underneath that anxiety was something new, something like trust, trust that the light would still be on. Trust that the systems he'd put in place would work. Trust that letting go, even just a little, wouldn't mean everything would collapse. When they arrived home, the lighthouse was exactly as they'd left it. The light was rotating, the glass was clean, the ocean was still breathing. "See?" Anna said. "Still standing." Elliot laughed, feeling almost giddy with relief. Still standing. They went inside, climbed to the lantern room, stood at the window and looked out at the familiar view. "I missed this," Elliot said. Me too, but I'm glad we left. So am I. Anna leaned against him. We could do it again sometime, if you want. I'd like that. Yeah? Yeah, he kissed the top of her head. I think I'm ready to stop hiding, to be part of the world again, as long as you're with me. Always, Anna whispered. I'm always with you. Summer passed into autumn. The days grew shorter again. The air turned crisp. The ocean darkened to slate gray. But inside the lighthouse, everything felt bright. Anna and Elliot had found a balance. They worked together, rested together, kept watch together. They took weekend trips sometimes, had friends over occasionally, Rita from the bookstore, a few of Elliot's old colleagues. The lighthouse became more than just Elliot's refuge. It became their home. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Anna said, I've been thinking. About what? About the light and what it means. Tell me. I think it's not really about keeping watch, not anymore. I think it's about being present, about showing up, about being the kind of steady thing that people can rely on when everything else feels uncertain. Elliot nodded slowly. That makes sense. And I think we do that for each other now. We're each other's light. We are. Anna took his hand. So maybe it's okay to rest, to turn off the light sometimes, to trust that we'll still be here when morning comes. Elliot looked at her, at this woman who had walked into his solitude and transformed it into something shared, something beautiful. You know what? He said. What? I think you're right. That night, for the first time in 6 years, Elliot turned off the light. Not permanently. Just for a few hours. Just to see what would happen. He and Anna went to bed together. They held each other in the darkness. And they slept. When Elliot woke in the middle of the night, his first instinct was panic. The light. He'd forgotten. He'd failed. But then he felt Anna beside him, warm and solid and real. And he remembered he'd chosen this, to rest, to trust. He got up quietly, careful not to wake her, climbed to the lantern room, turned the light back on, but this time he didn't stay. He went back to bed, curled around Anna, closed his eyes, and when morning came, the light was still turning, and they were still together, and everything was exactly as it should be. The story doesn't really end there, love, because stories like this, the quiet ones, the ones built on trust and presence and devotion, they don't have endings. They just continue. They unfold gently, day after day, moment after moment. Elliot and Anna stayed at the lighthouse. They kept watch together. They built a life that was small and steady and exactly what they needed. Some nights, the light burned through the darkness. Other nights, they let it rest, and always they were there for each other, present, constant, safe. Maybe you understand what drew Anna to that lighthouse in the first place. That feeling of needing somewhere to exist without pressure, without expectation, somewhere you could just be. Maybe you understand what kept Elliot there all those years. That need to feel useful, to hold something together, to believe that what you do matters. And maybe you understand what they found in each other, that rare and precious thing, a person who sees you completely and loves you anyway, a person who will keep watch when you need to rest, a person who will be the light when your own feels too dim. We all need that sometimes, a lighthouse, a steady thing, a promise that someone will stay awake while we sleep. And sometimes we get to be that for someone else. We get to be the light that guides them home, the presence that tells them they're not alone, the constant in a world that never stops moving. That's what this story is really about. Not grand gestures or dramatic confessions, just the quiet devotion of showing up, of being there, of keeping the light on. I hope you found some comfort in it tonight. I hope if you needed to rest, you did. And I hope if you needed to be reminded that you're not alone, you feel it now. Somewhere out there, a lighthouse is turning. A light is burning, and someone is keeping watch. Maybe it's for you. Maybe you're doing it for someone else. Either way, you're not alone in the dark. The light is on, and it always will be. Sleep well, love, or don't sleep at all. Either way, I'll be here. The stories will be here. And whenever you need a place to rest, you know where to find us. Until next time.